subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because today's story is one of secrets, betrayal, and revenge that unfolds layer by layer, quietly, invisibly, until the final truth hits like a thunderclap. It started with routine, or what I thought was routine. Every Friday evening, my wife, Elise, would say she was going out with friends. Sometimes she would mention the cafe on the riverfront, sometimes a wine bar tucked into the winding streets of Lyon's old town. The autumn evenings were crisp, the Rhone River reflecting amber streetlights like molten gold, and I tried to convince myself that she deserved time for herself. But there was a nagging unease that clung to the edges of my thoughts, a suspicion I could neither explain nor dismiss. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Elise had always been charming, unpredictable in ways that made her both irresistible and frustrating. She had a circle of friends, a life beyond our apartment in Croix-Rousse, a life I had chosen to trust, or perhaps ignore. But the little lies, the sudden silences when I asked who she was meeting, the way her eyes darted to her phone just a bit too quickly, it all accumulated, a quiet mosaic of doubt. So, I hired a private investigator. I justified it in my mind as practical, a simple measure to uncover the truth before it tore me apart. I gave the PI her routine, the cafe addresses, her usual patterns, and asked for nothing more than photographs, evidence, proof, clarity. I did not anticipate the truth. I did not anticipate the moment the PI sent the first photo. The image arrived in an encrypted email. Elise, smiling, arms wrapped around a man whose face I did not recognize, standing outside a boutique hotel in Lyon. Not a cafe, not a bar, not a casual gathering. She was dressed in a way she never dressed at home. Fitted, elegant, deliberately alluring. My stomach turned as I studied the photograph, each detail etched in my mind. The subtle hand on his shoulder, the tilt of her chin, the smirk that had once been reserved for me. I confronted her that night. The apartment was silent, the only sound the wind rattling the shutters and the faint hum of distant traffic. Elise's eyes widened, not at the accusation itself, but at the confirmation of the truth she had hidden. "It's not what you think," she said, voice calm but brittle. We're just friends. He's helping me with a project." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to collapse into relief, to forgive, to pretend this had been paranoia. But something in her tone, the careful way she avoided my gaze, told me otherwise. I realized then that trust, once fractured, could never be fully restored. I began to watch, not with obsession, but with methodical calculation. I tracked her routines, studied her social media, read between the lines of seemingly innocuous posts. Each Friday, each photo from the PI, each inconsistency, added to the tapestry of betrayal. I discovered reservations for trips she never mentioned, dinners she never acknowledged, and whispers from acquaintances who assumed I knew nothing. Yet, amidst the growing anger, a new plan formed. A plan not born from jealousy alone, but from the need to reclaim control, to reveal not just her duplicity, but the truth of the life we had built together. If she was capable of such deception, if she could hide layers of herself from me, then the stage was set for a reckoning. I delved into her history, speaking to former colleagues, distant relatives, and friends who had known her before me. Slowly, the image crystallized. Elise had always been ambitious, driven by desire and strategy more than sentiment. Her charm had won me, but it had also shielded her from scrutiny for years. She moved in circles I'd never imagined, circles of influence, of subtle manipulation, and now it seemed I was only seeing the tip of an iceberg that had been lurking beneath the surface of our marriage. Winter came to Lyon, soft snow falling on the rooftops and bridges, painting the city in muted shades of gray and silver. It was during these cold months that I put the pieces together. Elise's project friend was not a friend. He was a collaborator in schemes that reached into business ventures we had invested in together, into social connections that had always seemed benign. And the betrayal was more than personal. It was financial, political, and strategic. Armed with the evidence, I confronted her again, this time in a public space where the anonymity of the crowd lent me courage. The air in Place des Terreaux was sharp and biting. the fountains frozen over, sculptures glinting with frost. I laid out the evidence, the hotel stays, the trips, the communications. She did not protest. She did not deny. Her eyes, wide and unflinching, met mine, and in that gaze, I saw a mixture of fear and admiration, a recognition of the force I had become. The aftermath was precise. I withdrew from our shared finances, restructuring investments to protect what was legally mine. I engaged lawyers who specialized in marital and corporate disputes, turning every document, every contract, into a lever of power. Friends and associates, initially unaware of the full scope, began to align according to the truth I revealed. And all the while, Elise remained in the city, a constant reminder of the betrayal, forced to navigate a world in which her manipulations no longer held sway. By spring, I had established control not only over my financial and legal landscape, but over the narrative itself. The PI's photographs, once a source of anguish, had become instruments of empowerment. Each image, each subtle revelation, had guided me toward a larger understanding that betrayal, once exposed, could be countered not with emotion alone, but with strategy, patience, and precision. Elise attempted to rebuild, to charm her way back into circles of influence, but the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. I no longer relied on hope or trust. I relied on evidence, strategy, and the quiet satisfaction of watching consequences unfold. And when we crossed paths, whether in cafes along the Sound River or in meetings with mutual acquaintances, the dynamic was undeniable. She had underestimated the methodical patience I had cultivated, the cold clarity born from betrayal. The final reckoning came during an investment summit in Lyon, where both our professional and personal networks converged. I presented a proposal that subtly highlighted her missteps and undermined her credibility without a single overt confrontation. The room, filled with influential figures, responded with measured admiration for my competence and wariness toward her duplicity. She left the summit that evening not with triumph, but with the quiet, bitter realization that control had slipped from her grasp. Walking home through the narrow streets, lights reflecting off wet cobblestones, I felt a complex mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Betrayal had scarred me, but it had also forged me into someone capable of navigating deception, of wielding knowledge and patience as instruments of justice. The PI's photographs, once a symbol of anguish, now symbolized clarity, the moment when I had first seen the truth, when the path to revenge had been illuminated. Even now, years later, I occasionally think of those Fridays, the casual words, the deliberate smiles, and the photograph that changed everything. Elise's betrayal shaped me. Her duplicity taught me strategy, and the slow burn of revenge revealed depths of resilience I had never known. The city of Lyon, with its winding alleys, frozen fountains, and misty river nights, witnessed both my despair and my triumph. And in that, I understood the quiet poetry of patience, the subtle art of justice, and the enduring power of truth once it is finally revealed. The story ends not with violence, not with overt confrontation, but with the unshakable realization that betrayal, when met with clarity and careful action, can be transformed into a force that redefines the boundaries of power, influence, and self-respect. And as I stand by the riverbank, watching the water glint under the rising sun, I smile quietly, knowing that I am no longer a victim, but a master of my own destiny.